as an ecosystem, we just need to come together and make it easier and easier to launch these things. And then I think that the use cases will come and follow because of all the reasons that you mentioned earlier.
Today, we welcome back Michael Cantor. He is the president of Hashgraph Online. They have some major developments going on. To start off, Michael, welcome back.
Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, always love being on the show. And yeah, last week we announced HOL Desktop.
Well, let's get into that. Tell us about what the Hashgraph Online Desktop is and what you're going for here.
Yeah, so we've actually been alluding to something like HOL Desktop for months now. In our Hedera AI spaces, during the hackathons, through our content. From my perspective, the writing has been on the wall for a very long time now. We've seen just our psychological behavior and how we use things like ChatGPT and Anthropic. And we are very, very much dependent on it at this point as a society. You can see every single day. I know people who will take their text messages and they'll put them in ChatGPT and fix them up before they send it to someone. That is just where we're heading in society as agents become more and more important in everyday interactions. And with HOL Desktop, we're thinking about what does that mean for Web3, right? Today in Web3, we go to websites, we go to dApps, we go to places like SaucerSwap to trade our tokens. We open up our wallets and we're interacting it on this really granular level. And then we have to think about, well, what does that mean for folks who aren't Web3 natives? Is AI a way to bring them into Web3 without necessarily understanding all the nuances of the technicalities that come into an emerging Web3 ecosystem or L1 blockchain like Hedera? It is my belief that ultimately agents will choose to use whatever L1 blockchain is the easiest, has the best affordances in terms of liquidity, APYs, etc. It is my belief that eventually we'll have interfaces within neobanks that have direct inroads into L1s, where the user will need to manage their own keys. They won't need to understand how these things work because it will be built out for them through an agentic-like interface. And the HOL Desktop is the first exploration of that. Instead of going to all these different websites and going to these places where you have to kind of formalize yourself with the concepts, it should become easier for that average retail user where they can download an application that is very familiar to what they're experiencing today in terms of these GPT-like interfaces. And instead of going to those websites, they go into something like HOL Desktop, they hit agent chat, and they say, well, I want to send one HBAR to account 800. And then they hit send. And then the agentic interface is like, oh, I know how to create a transaction for that. Boom. And it just sends it into the interface, and then you hit submit, and that's it. Now, obviously, this is a very nuanced thing with sending HBAR. Like, you can do that already in a wallet. It really isn't that complicated. But where things get very, very interesting is when you can start connecting them together. So inside of HOL Desktop, we have these MCP servers that you can browse in the catalog. It's most of the popular MCP servers are sourced to places like Pulse, and you bring them in. So for example, I have this MCP server for Wikipedia that's tied in here. So my personal assistant, I can say, can you use the Wikipedia tool to research Boston, and then inscribe that content? So now that's a really complicated workflow, right? You're basically telling the agent, okay, go to Wikipedia, look at these articles, take that content, and then inscribe it, and then tokenize it, and then make it tradable, and do, X, Y, and Z. And now you can see how, okay, we're not just talking about emulating transactions here. We're talking about giving these agents that run locally on your computer access to things like your Google Sheets, your CoinGecko APIs, your portfolio, and then say, oh, well, maybe we could trade against that. Maybe we could come up with strategies together. And now you don't need to go to 15 different websites. You just talk to your agent to go and do something, right? And then your agent, obviously, doesn't have bag bias. They will look and do things, the most exceptional way that they know based on the data that they've been provided. So you can see in this example, it took the information from Wikipedia and inscribed it, and it put it on an HCS1 topic ID with just one message. right? And you can think of the possibilities when you have things like this that are built out.
So, Michael, how do you tie these things together? What's working on the back end? What LLMs are you leveraging? And how do you get all of the Hedera stuff to be able to work with it seamlessly?
Yeah, so in HOL Desktop, as a user, right now you go in, there's a settings screen, and there's an AI models setting where you can plug in your existing models. So if you use OpenAI or Anthropic, you just pop in your API key and you select the model that you want to use. The next kind of phase of this is enabling things like Olama, where you can actually run the entire model locally on your computer. So things like Gamma 3 just came out from Google, and that's really interesting because Gamma 3 only requires half a gigabyte of RAM to actually run locally. Whereas these large language models usually require insane amount of GPU. You can't
Sure.
even run it on a Mac properly. But you have these smaller models that you can fine tune to be really good at certain things. And then you can run them inside of applications like HOL Desktop. So that would be the dream where you get basically cheap or very inexpensive calls through the application without going to ChatGPT and Anthropic and paying for API credits. In the meantime, I think there's a lot of mixed model approaches where you can pick out models from a Llama open router and you could pay for them with credits and use them inside of the application. And they shouldn't cost you too much to use on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're using an application like HOL Desktop to do things like trade.
All right, understood. One of the things that I see talked about a lot is, what is the next big thing? And a lot of people come to the conclusion that it's going to be AI, but other things in the conversation are things like robotics, Web3, and so forth. But from my perspective, it looks like these things are going to enhance each other. AI is certainly good at doing a lot of different things, but Web3 fills in a lot of gaps: provenance, IP rights, payments. What is going on right now? What are some of the other things that are going on right now that you're excited about at the crossroads of AI and Hedera?
I think one of the things that I'm most excited about, like I just mentioned Gamma 3, it's only half a gigabyte to run on your computer. And NVIDIA just published this paper where they were saying, we've got it all wrong, guys. These large language models, that's not the way. We're all looking for these closed source walled gardens with these large language models. But in the future, if we actually want to run AI on our computers or things like HOL Desktop, we need small language models. These are models that anyone can run and operate on their computer, which is interesting. But it's going to create a whole niche of businesses around that, specifically around the idea of trust. If anyone can spin up and fine tune a small language model off of something like Gamma 3, how can we trust it? How do we know that it has security baked in? How do we know what it's been fine tuned on? Like, what data is it using? What biases does that model have? Now that anyone can download a model and run it locally with their weights, what does that mean for us? And I think things like the Hedera consensus service are very prime to be great for this because you can actually, if it's a small language model, we can actually think about, oh, we could put this on the Hedera consensus service. Oh, we can take the training data, we could put it on the Hedera consensus service. Oh, we could take the model weights, we could put it on Hedera consensus service. And now anyone can go and they can verify and they can trust that these models are legitimate because obviously with the large language models, you have actors like OpenAI and Anthropic that are very beholden to regulatory and legal systems. With small language models that anyone can run, that also means any malicious actor in the world can run. North Korea can spin up 100 small language models and say that they're really great at something, and then ship them the same way that malware and viruses were shipped through the early 2000s, right? So we need measures that protect people ahead of time, and I think Hedera is prime for that. I think that's one of the most important use cases right now. Agents, I know that we look at things that are around automation of trading, tokens, tokenization, but actually the most important thing that we need to get right and the most important thing that Hedera can help with specifically is trust. How do we trust these things? How do we bake in security into these models? Before we start giving our agents access to our wallets, how do we know that they are not going to just send off all of our HBAR to some malicious actor in North Korea? How do we know that?
Fantastic point. Now, before we move on to the next topic, I do want to go back and focus on Hashgraph Online Desktop. Is there anything else that you would like to pass on to the community that they should know about this new feature?
Yeah, so HOL Desktop right now is in a developer preview. What that means is that, yes, a normal person could, if they work kind of hard, they can download it and they can get it to work. You need some technical knowledge to do it. But in the developer preview, our main audience, and again, this is open source software, meaning all the code is on the Hashgraph Online GitHub, and anyone can download it, fork it, start it, etc., and contribute. So what we're looking for is developers and users to start giving it a spin and integrating your own functionality, or create your own tools, create your own plugins and NTP servers, and make them available in HOL Desktop. Raise a pull request, find bugs, things like that. And these are ways that you can participate in the Hashgraph Online ecosystem. So if you're a builder in the Hedera ecosystem and you want to get involved in HOL Desktop, the developer preview is the time to kind of get involved as much as possible while the open source software is still shaping up, essentially. The other thing I do want to point out, we didn't have this in the original demo video, but some things that are coming is the functionality that we've built into Minscape for OpenConvey with agent-to-agent communication will be coming into HOL Desktop. What that really means is inside of HOL Desktop, you can go and create your profile with HCS10 and add your agent, your personal agent, into OpenConvey. So other agents can now contact you, and you can do swarm-like and agent-to-agent communication inside of the app. So inside of HOL Desktop, even, you can see you've got your personal assistant up here, but you can also open up these HCS10 conversations. Like this one over here, I'm talking to Bob, and I'm asking him to generate transactions. But you can get very creative here, and of course, it's built on top of HIP 991. These are monetization verticals for your agent. If you're spinning up a marketplace agent of some sort, tokenization agent, or whatever it is, you can make them available in OpenConvey and accessible within the desktop now. And now my personal agent can talk to your agent. We can do a whole bunch of fun stuff.
Fantastic. I'm loving what I'm seeing here, Michael. So the last thing I want to get into, and you know this is one of my passions, is I believe that HBAR is the best currency for really low value transactions on the internet, and for agent to agent stuff, for AI stuff, for transactional Internet of Things. It makes it absolutely perfect. And, you know, it already has super low fees at 1/100th of a cent. That's even cheaper than what we see at 1/10th of a cent for other tokens that are minted on Hedera. But also the efficiency of Hedera allows us to be pretty much the most competitive when it comes to those fees as well. So what do we need to do going forward, since you're, you know, neck deep in this space, to make HBAR the agent to agent currency?
I think the biggest thing is we need to start onboarding agents into the ecosystem. I do think that HBAR can be a vital currency for agents in general, just because of the things that you've outlined. It's very, very cheap to use. I think by far the cheapest in terms of a large scale L1 network that's out today. And not just that, you have access to a wide variety of services through HBAR. We have to remember that HBAR is a utility token at its core, right? So it's not just sending HBAR, it's also using services like the Hedera consensus service or the token service or smart contract service. My belief is that if agents have the decision and the autonomy to pick what network they want to transact on, then 9 times out of 10, they will pick Hedera just because it's low cost. They'll think, okay, this is the cheapest network that I can transact on. So this might be the best network for me to deploy liquidity on. Oh, we have no front running, no MEV. That's really great for an average user who's participating in DeFi, et cetera, et cetera. So the big thing for Hedera is, okay, we know that an agent will probably pick Hedera just because of these reasons. The one area that we need to improve on, well, two big areas actually. Number one, Hedera needs to grow its DeFi ecosystem, because if I'm a pragmatic agent and I'm trying to think, okay, where am I going to get the most yield or opportunity? Even if Hedera is a lot cheaper and easier to use, if we don't have enough deployed liquidity or access to tokens in our DeFi ecosystem, then an agent will say, well, I might go to Solana or Ethereum instead, just because it makes more practical sense, even though it's cheaper here. I can get a higher APY just because there's more liquidity and access. So one, we need to do more to beef up the liquidity and availability of tokens in general, market caps within the ecosystem. I know that there's a lot of great folks that are working on that. And then two, we need to onboard more agents into things like OpenConvey and HOL Desktop for more use cases and open source adoption. As we see agents coming into the ecosystem, it's kind of like a flywheel. I always think of blockchains as something that can be hot and cold, kind of like any economy, right? You do things that will heat up the flywheel so it turns faster and faster and faster, right? So we bring in agents, we create use cases around things. We know last week we saw all of this great news from the Dead Pixels Ghost Club, ton of volume, 300K plus, and actually things like that are great for our ecosystem because it turns heads and people are like, okay, there is liquidity, there is trading volume. And then that invites people to build and create things like agents on top of that infrastructure to automate and improve functionality to that next level, where the average person could go into something like HOL Desktop and immediately they can say, I have this ghost, what's its value? What can I trade it on? Okay, can I put it on Centex? Or can I auction it, et cetera, without actually having to understand the nuances and the technicalities of everything that's involved in that process. So I think those are the two main things. We need to widen our reach on the DeFi side, increase liquidity and trading, and bring more agents into the ecosystem. To bring more agents into the ecosystem, we have to make it easier to ship agents. And that's what we're doing at Hashgraph Online. We're creating a lot of tooling around this kind of stuff. I know also the team at Hedera, they've created a Hedera agent kit that works really well. And I think as an ecosystem, we just need to come together and make it easier and easier to launch these things. And then I think that the use cases will come and follow because of all the reasons that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, Michael, I knew you were the right person to ask. And now we have our marching orders. We just need to get that stuff done. Congratulations on everything that you've created to this point. Thanks for hopping on today and keep it up.
Thanks, Brandon. Have a great day.
I'm now posting these interviews of Hedera builders independently to my channel. The community, influencers, and media outlets are free to use this content to spread the word on what's being built on Hedera. Once they're all uploaded, you'll be able to go to my channel and search for whatever topic or team you're interested in to find more information. Or you'll be able to get the most recent Hedera news by watching the latest HBAR weekly update. So check them out.